right? When it comes to the organizational level, right, mainly they have to come up with goals and measures, right? Under that you have organization goals and measures of organizational success at the top level, right? At the process level, what happens? Process goals and measures of the process success, right? In the middle level, right? They come up with the process level, process goals and measures of process success. In the activity of the performance level, the activity goals and measures of activity success, right? So then we have the design and implementation, right? At the organizational level, you find organizational design and implementation, right? The more holistic approach there. Then we have the middle level or the process level, if you wish, the process design and implementation. The activity or the implementation level, activity design and implementation. So when it comes to management, what happens? At the organizational level, organizational management, process level, process management, and the activity of the performance level, activity management. So that we have definite three levels of concerns here, right? Organizational level, process level, and activity level, right? Then we have right how notice how similar the idea expressed in the Ramler and Brack framework are to the idea expressed in the SCI capability maturity model, right? Last week we discussed that, and we considered in the introduction. Both seek to describe an organization that is mature and capable of taking advantage of systematic processes. Both stress that we must be concerned not only with the design of process themselves, but also with measures of success and with the management of process. In effect, the CMM diagram describes how organizations evolve towards process maturity, and the Ramla and Brack framework describes all of the things that is mature organization must master. So when it comes to the mature organization must align both vertically and horizontally, right? What do you mean by vertically and horizontally? Right, from top to bottom to left to right, right? So activity goals must be related to process goals, which must in turn be derived from the strategic goal of the organization. Similarly, the process must be in integrated whole with goals and the measures, a good design that is well implemented, and the management system that use the goal and measures to ensure that process runs smoothly and if need be, is improved. The Ramla and Brack methodology has helped everyone involved in business process change to understand the scope of the problem, and it provides the foundation on which all today's comprehensive redesign and methodologies are based, right? So that in here we find something called silo thinking, right? So what do you mean by silo thinking? What does it mean by silo thinking? Anyone? What do you mean by silo thinking? So where that occurs more often, silo thinking, you know that when we are having this functional orientation, right? But before that, I just want to tell you, what do you mean by a silo? What is it mean by silo? You know that sometimes back, right? So you probably would have noticed in the on the television uh, that they have shown us some silos for some silos, the huge silos uh, used by the particular that rice manufacturers to store their paddy cultivation or the paddy harvest. So it's a barrel shaped huge structure, right? There they put all these what you call that the paddy in order to keep them preserved for the longer period of time, right? So that just forget about the paddy silos. Just think of a barrel, right? So if I get into a barrel and hide, what happens? Anyone? No one can see me, right? So that when we are taking this functional orientation, is something similar to like something similar to that. So that may if you targeting, other barrel is production, other barrel is HRM, and next barrel is accounting and finance line. Now what happens? So they have this functional orientation, right? So this kind of approach, so that when it comes to the marketing paper, they would say, okay, we are the people who sell the product. So we are the people so important for the organization, but that is because we earn the money for the organization. On the other hand, the production people would say that we do the production. If we don't perform the production, you people don't have anything to sell. So that we are the best department in the organization. So that based on this kind of a mentality, when they work within the organization, what happens? It is very difficult to fulfill the customer requirement, right? So that kind of a thinking we call silo thinking. So they see the things in terms of departmental interest, this functional orientation mainly, right? So that here they say most companies had focused on dividing processes into specific activities that were assigned to specific departments. Each department developed its own standards and procedures to manage these activities delegated to it. Along the way, in many cases, departments became focused on doing their own activities in their own way, without much regard for the overall process. This is often referred to as silo thinking, an image that suggests that each department on the organization chart is its own isolated silo. So that if you are get into a barrel and work alone with it, only concentrating your own interest in the department, like that kind of approach we call silo thinking. So you don't see what happens in other functional areas, what happens in the other parts of the organization, like right. This kind of thing we call silo thinking. That is very bad for the organization, but that is happens all the time when we are having the functional orientation. But when we are, when we come to the process orientation, or what happens is, as we have seen earlier, we eliminate this functional orientation. We see the things in terms of processes, right? Ultimately, our suppliers and the customers are pretty much important for us in this kind of a process oriented approach. Then in the business computing, in the early years of business computing, a sharp distinction was made between corporate computing and departmental computing. Few systems like payroll and accounting were developed and maintained at the corporate level. Other systems were created by individual departments to serve their specific needs. Typically, on departmental system wouldn't talk to another, and the idea stored in the database of the sales couldn't be exchanged with data in the database owned by accounting or the manufacturing. In essence, in an effort to make such a department as professional and efficient as possible, the concept of the overall process was lost. So this is a very good example, right? Just think of a public sector organization in our country, right? What happens? So if there are various divisions of the department in that organization, so most of the time these departmental people more concentrated on their own activities, right? They don't bother about the other departments. They don't. As a result, what happens? They totally neglected the customer requirement, right? So that's why the public sector is so inefficient. So they mainly concentrated on their own activity. So that means they are functional orientation. They have more functional orientation towards their own activity line. So they don't worry about the whatever the other department activities or the difficulties or the what they going through actually, right? So that when there is a this kind of a functional orientation is there, when there is a kind of functional silos are there, it is extremely difficult for the organization to fulfill their customers' obligations, right? So that's why the functional orientation is very bad for the organization. The emphasis on value chain and system in the 1980s and the emphasis on business process reengineering in the early 90s was a revolt against excessive departmentalism and the call for a more holistic view of the how activities needed to work together to achieve organizational goals. So that with the introduction of the value chain in the 1980s and the emphasis on the business process reengineering in the early 1990s was a revolt against the excessive departmentalism, right? So that no functional orientation was supported with these value chain and the business process reengineering. That was pretty much to do what? More towards the holistic activity or the more process orientation, more towards the process orientation. Call for more holistic view of how activities needed to work together to achieve the organizational goal. So that if we, that's the organization. That's what we say. You have to start with the defining your vision and the mission and the goal, right? So every functional activity targeted on that end to achieving their vision, mission, and the objective. So their own functional orientation, like the marketing, is not important, but they have to have the more holistic approach and achieve the organizational goals, right? So that was the content for the today's lesson. And if you have any questions to ask, you may do so now. Anyone? Any questions you want to raise? Yes. Just any questions you want to ask? But we have covered up to now. No. Business process management.
Notation 1 and notation 2.
Very good. BPM main.
Yes.
Okay, good. So when I will come to that, right? So that you know that in order to map these different processes, right? So I think I have shown you earlier. I will come to that screen, right? It's easier for me to explain. You mean BPMN, Business Process Management Notation. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here, this visible for you? Hello, is it visible for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here on the top diagram, right, you would see the standard what is called the symbols we use. For example, so this rectangular one, so one shape, so that is the standard we maintain. That is the in order to represent the activities of a process, we have this kind of a shape line, right? And again, so that we have wordings in verbs, right? We don't use any other, but we have simply the verbs to explain, to indicate that these are the different activities which performs in this particular process line. And again, you have this some kind of a symbols, like for example at the start you have this round shape on the object, right? So that is the start event we call it, right? So that is having the unique shape. And then you have this with first this diamond shape object, right? So likewise, there are certain number of notations, right? We use to communicate, and we use them in order to draw these business process notations. So that is what we call BPM main. So collectively, we will at the practicals we take one by one, and we use the Visajit tool to discuss all these, right? So the latter part of the semester, when we start the university, we will do that in the computer lab, right? Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? If you don't have any of the answers, then we can wind up, right?